On 3rd and 3, they protect Brady. Scans the field and lets it fly. It's Evans. It's a touchdown.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo! And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Happy Victory Monday, and welcome back to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish, joining us as well. Excited to get his take on the game from last Sunday. Former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback Shaun King. We talked a lot about it on the post-game show yesterday. We'll get a little bit more into it now. An interesting game. When you talk about comparing where the Bucs were in Week 4 against Kansas City to Week 5 at home against Atlanta, some things got better. Some things may or may not have gotten better. But I think the thing everybody wants to talk about right now is the roughing the passer call at the end of the game. So just want to get this take out of the way because this has been the hot topic all day. And I feel like once, we're 24 hours removed from the game, it's hard for me to sit here and milk this topic. But realistically, some people do see this as a call that affected the outcome of the game. I don't necessarily feel that way. Evan doesn't feel that way. But Shaun, how you feeling about Jerome Boger's call in the final few minutes of this one?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, no one will remember except did you win or did you lose. No one will remember the call for you, against you. So start off, they found a way to win. And okay, hat tip to that. Bad call, but so was the defensive holding that they got on the same drive on the previous third down. So they got the calls this game. There'll be some games later where they won't get the calls, That's probably the most, frustrating part of the National Football League. And it's the one thing that I don't think they have any kind of level of consistency. And that's the calls are so drastically interpreted differently from game to game. I mean, what one crew is calling pass interference, another crew is letting DBs get away with felony assault. And then another game, it's like the DB plays it perfect, and it's all over the place. I don't know what roughing the passer is. I think someone said Coach Dungy called the league, and the league confirmed that it wasn't roughing the passer. But hey, man, when it comes to calls, I used to line up every week knowing, okay, probably will be 5 to 6 bad calls a day. Let's just hope we get half of them. Like, they go our way. Because that's just, it is what it is. That's the human part of it that you can't control.
Yeah, and that's something I brought up on the post-game show, last night. I said, refs are bad. Like, a lot of refs in sports, like, they're going to be bad. They're going to miss calls. And we all said, I don't really think there's not many. I don't think there shouldn't be any, saying that it was a good call. It wasn't. It was a terrible call. That being said, the refs also missed a blatant pass interference on the previous play.
On Scotty Miller. Yeah.
So, they missed that one and they called that one. On the Falcons touchdown, Antoine Winfield was being held on the Falcons touchdown to open up a wide open lane. They missed that call. And they missed a few calls against the Bucs too. And there's going to be those. And just like you said, I think a lot of players sort of go into it expecting that there's going to be some calls that shouldn't be called but will be, or there's going to be some calls that should be called that aren't. It's like you said, it's all about that referee's discretion and what they interpret as a penalty. And that's where I think, the rule book's the rule book, but at the end of the day, it's that crew's decision. And that's, like you said, the consistency, it is completely different from crew to crew. And sometimes you'll get a crew that is more lenient with pass interference, or sometimes you'll get a crew like, oh yeah, you better not touch them or else you're going to get called for it. So, it is what it is. It was a factor in the game. It was not the factor. I saw a lot of people, people are acting like the Falcons had the lead and the roughing the passer got the Bucs in field goal position to kick the game-winning field goal. The Falcons were still down 6. So let's say the sack that happens, it's not called roughing the passer. The Falcons still would have needed to go down the field and score a touchdown. So was it a factor in the game? Yeah, but like that game wasn't like it wouldn't have been over. Like the Falcons wouldn't have sealed the win right there. So I don't know why a lot of people are acting like the Falcons had the lead and that would have been the game clinching play, because it wasn't. Was it a factor? Yes, but it was not the factor in deciding the game.
You know, Evan and Rhett, when I look at that play, I don't even care about the ref. The more concerning part for me is in a crucial part in the fourth quarter late of a game, our offensive line couldn't pick up a TE stunt. Like, that's the part that is alarming, that in that situation, the communication didn't happen. So they knew that the end was going inside, the tackle's looping around, that they needed to adjust and pick the pressure up. That was the scary part. Like, I'm more worried and concerned about that than I was, you know, any flag that we got or shouldn't have gotten, you know, because those are going to happen. But the communication issue up front, and I know we're going to get into the game, not being able to put away a team like the Falcons when you have a 21-0 lead. You know, I think it was Devin White said something after the game that was really alarming when I think he, I don't want to misquote him. So if you guys have the quote and you can say it word for word, but it was something in the context like we got bored or.
Yeah, he was speaking to reporters after the game. And Rhett, do you have the quote there?
I should have it here in a second.
Yeah, so he was speaking to reporters after the game, and just like Shaun said, he kind of poor wording, I think. I understand what he's trying to say, but it's just very, very poorly worded, and a lot of people kind of took exception to it.
And as Rhett looks for the quote, the opinion that I had was, it's alarming for me because championship teams don't compete against the competition.
Right.
They compete against themselves. They're trying to be a better version of themselves every play, every series, every game. No matter who they're playing, the standard is the standard.
Well, and also I feel like as a defense, and you played with some fantastic defenses, so you would know, and especially you going up against them in practice every day. As a defense, you got to have like that killer mentality, to put the game away. You have a 21-point lead. Now I know the defense, when Atlanta's first drive that they scored on, like Atlanta started with the ball past midfield, so like that's a tough situation there, but. Yeah, like make the plays to end it. Don't let Atlanta come back at all or have any chance. And that's a defensive job there.
So the quote from Devin White, talking about the Falcons comeback late in that game, he says, quote, "When you're beating a team, kind of imposing your will on them, it can get boring and you can tend to get less aggressive," end quote. So yeah, I can totally understand where people would see that as concerning, considering that we've come to the conclusion that this Bucs defense, when they won the Super Bowl in 2020, could be touted as one of the best in the league. But so far this year, they've been good. But when you get railed like you did last week against Kansas City, a lot of people are going to remember that. And you start to wonder, man, 2, 3, 4 weeks from now, when the Bucs are back to playing tougher opponents, how well is that going to age?
And let's be honest, guys, good teams win, great teams cover. Let's not talk about the elephant in the room.
I think the Falcons covered this week too.
Bucs are favored by 10. They're up 21, and they don't cover. And what they don't understand now, half the people in the stadium are just there in the hopes that they win. The other half want them to actually win and allow them to pay for those tickets.
That's true. But I mean, now just a little bit of a betting thing here. Atlanta is now 5-0 this season against the spread. So if you want to see betting trends, maybe pay close attention to the lines when Atlanta plays.
If you would have told me Atlanta would come in with no Kyle Pitts, no Cordell Patterson, and it would be a 6-point game with 2 minutes left in the fourth, I just that's alarming to me. And I know it's hard to win in that league, but my expectation, my standard for this particular group, because I think it might be the last year this group is together as we know it. Mm-hmm. We've already started to see some of the Super Bowl pieces move on. And Sue isn't there. JPP got a sack last night. And I know we're going to talk about some of the young players. You mentioned that earlier, Rhett, because I did think Joe Tryon for the first time. looked like he had flashed some high-end pass rushing capabilities, because we need that from our front four. I don't think we've consistently gotten it. So, some opportunities there. Rashad White, you started to see him flash a little bit. I'm sure we're going to talk about all that. I am concerned that it seems that we struggle for explosive plays. And it's hard in this league to put 8 to 10 plays together every time to score points. I think it's the biggest issue with the Indianapolis Colts. They don't have explosiveness at wide receiver. And when you can't throw it under 10 yards and have guys athletic enough to turn those into chunk plays, now you have to not have false starts. You have to convert a lot of third downs. You saw early in the game, we had 4th and short. I wouldn't say Leonard Fournette necessarily ran in with the most enthusiasm I've seen to pick up that yard, but you're going to be in those kind of situations when, you're trying to dink and dunk it, down the field.
Here's the most frustrating thing to me when you talk about the explosiveness. Indy's receivers, like it's Michael Pittman and then a bunch of random guys. Like the Tampa receivers we've seen in the past. We've seen Chris Godwin be explosive. We've seen Mike Evans be explosive. So I think that's the more frustrating thing to me when you're lacking explosives, because this group can do it. It's just they haven't been able to do it yet this season. And that's the frustrating thing to me. I was more disappointed with the fourth quarter offense than a defense, but we'll get into some of the other stuff as we go on here.
So while we are talking about the offense and your thoughts from the game, you had mentioned it when talking about that Grady Jarrett sack from late in the game, but Luke Geticky, along that offensive line, we know that coming into the season after losing Ryan Jensen and then the retirement of Ali Marpet, it was going to be a makeshift group of guys. Your front five so far this season has been okay. They haven't been god-awful. They haven't been the best in the league, or at least comparable to that, like they have been in recent seasons with Jensen and Marpet available. But Luke Goedeke, he had a rough game. I know Brady kind of made up for it by getting the ball out quickly, but he was definitely feeling the pressure Sunday against Atlanta. What do you make of this rookie so far? I know that there's going to be growing pains. He's a young offensive lineman who just went from playing at Central Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, to now blocking for Tom Brady. And he has had an absolute gauntlet these first 5 weeks of the season as far as the defensive talent he's been facing. But do you think it's going to get better? Do you think the Bucs maybe need to readdress that position at some point, or are they just going to let it ride?
I think you kind of have to let it. Look, he's a 2nd round pick. So you've invested a high draft pick in him. And I'm not saying a draft pick is the reason, because a player's not productive if the player sits. But I've seen Sunday wasn't. I think Sunday actually might have been Getticky's worst start in the NFL. I think he's played a lot better. It's Grady Jarrett was just really getting the best of him consistently. Even like on the very first play of the game from scrimmage, Tom Brady had to kind of throw it in the dirt because Geticky just got blown over there, and he had a rough go of it. There's been He's had some tough assignments. Obviously, Chris Jones last week, Grady Jarrett this week. Those are 2 really good players. Kenny Clark the week before that. But I think on tape, he has looked a bit better. But you can also tell that this is a rookie who is, like you said, is from a smaller school and is playing on a big stage now in big moments for a team trying to win. If they were in a rebuilding year, like that's different. Then you go with the growing pains and you just hope he develops. But the Bucs need him to be productive. And Robert Haynesey, the 2 biggest question marks on the offensive line were Robert Haynesey at center and Luke Goedeke left guard. Robert Haynesey seems to be, really earning a lot of trust there. He's been pretty solid early on in the season here. Hopefully he can keep it up. But Gedecky's really starting to, hit that rookie wall, and he's struggling. And so I don't think you make a change, because I think he's shown you enough. He's shown you some glimpses. But, I think that he definitely needs to be better, because right now it destroys the flow of an offense. And one guy on an offensive line getting beat specifically up the middle really hurts this offense. And I think Geticky needs to be better, but I also think he will be better. Like I said, I thought Sunday was probably his worst performance. So hopefully he can just put that behind him.
You can't replace him, because if they had anybody better, trust me, they'd be out
playing.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like we talked about last week, if they had anybody on the street that was better, he'd be on the team. So
there are probably 25 other teams that are having the same conversation right now in personnel. Guys, is there anybody available that can help us protect our quarterback? But if I was Coach Bowles or Byron, here's what I would do. I would platoon Geticky. I think we talked about this on a previous show. As long as you can keep the backup guys fresh, sometimes there isn't a huge drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
The drop-off really occurs when the lower talent gets fatigued. And now you have Shaq Mason gets tired, he's still Shaq Mason. You know what I mean? And Tristan Wirfs gets tired, he's still Tristan Wirfs. Luke Goedeke, rookie, not expected to contribute, on a Super Bowl caliber team, and that's kind of why it's so magnified. Like his performances, have even greater attention on him. It's because of who he's protecting and what's at stake. And I'm not really sure if it's every other series. Maybe it's Geticky goes 2, Haynesey goes 1. Then Geticky goes, but I rotate them to try and keep both of them as fresh as possible. And then if it looks like one of them's having a great game, then I just ride the hot hand. But you don't ever want a guy that probably shouldn't be participating as much as he is to sabotage the entire thing. And that almost happened on Sunday. Because and be honest, Grady Jarrett is an elite defensive lineman in this league. So it's not like, he was going up against chopped liver. Does get a break next week. TJ Watt won't be back. Had knee surgery, so he's going to miss even more time. I think Pittsburgh's about to tank.
Yeah, they're in trouble.
That Carolina defensive line, you just don't know how Derek Brown and Brian Burns and those guys are going to react to Matt Rule being fired. Sometimes it invigorates an organization, and sometimes guys are like, well, let me not get hurt the rest of the year.
It seems like more times than not, I mean, even the teams that don't have a whole lot to play for were still in the first quarter of the season, but seems like some teams step it up and play a little bit harder under an interim head coach. I mean, we look back to
most of the time. I think it's a wake-up call for.
I know the Bucs haven't fired a head coach in mid-season, in a couple of years, but we look at Mike Smith getting let go during Dirk Cutter's last season here when I'm blanking out at his name.
Mark Duffner.
Yeah, when Mark Duffner stepped up, that defense looked good that second half of the season after the departure of Smith, and they were winning some games down the stretch. So it could be a tougher matchup than we initially thought, especially with Baker Mayfield now being hurt, his status up in the air.
I saw that, and they were like, "Oh, PJ Walker will start versus the Panthers, versus the Bucs." I was like, "I'd rather play against Baker."
Yeah, no kidding, man. I mean, it's an even bigger question mark with PJ Walker and the Bucs' experience with quarterbacks with his skill set. But keeping the conversation on the offense for Tampa Bay, wanted to talk about some of these other young players who have really stepped up and contributed. You look at this 2022 draft class, and honestly, you could go down the list, and it seems like every single one of these guys has a presence so far on this team. We just talked about Luke Goedeke, the second-round pick. Let's talk about I guess you could call him a first-round pick, but the first pick of the second round, defensive lineman Logan Hall. If I'm not mistaken, he's got 2 or 3 sacks already on the season. I mean, he's been productive, and I like what I have seen.
And I think when you couple him with Joe Tryon, who looks like he's developing, I mean, it makes sense because at some point the allocation of resources is going to have to shift. And so what you love is for Tryon to eventually replace Shaq Barrett and Logan Hall to be able to handle the other side. And now you have 2 team-friendly contracts at a premium position, because when Brady does leave, I mean, you're going to have to make some decisions about where you're going to spend this money. And I would imagine offensive line is going to be one of them. I think, we'll see. I mean, so, yeah, I talked to the guys at Houston, his college DC, Doug Belk. When I asked him about him, said he's unbelievably talented. I was like, well, why no production at Houston? And he was like, well, because we moved him around too much. It was our fault. So they started him inside and then moved him outside, and he never really got a chance to really cook. But, Doug was adamant that he was worthy of where he was selected and that Tampa was going to be proud. So I'm glad to see that, Logan's starting to show, that explosiveness and that big playability that shout out to Jason Light, too. I know he came in, kind of unknown, when he was awarded the GM job in Tampa, but when you really look at what he's done through free agency and the draft, I mean, he's been outstanding.
Yeah, he's been one of, I think, probably over the last few years. Obviously, it helps having Tom Brady, but here's the thing: like, he built a roster that was appealing enough to Tom Brady, so that was, that's another tip in his cap. So yeah, I mean, you talk about Joe Tryon, Schwinka, and then Logan Hall. The Bucs kind of have already started that. Joe Tryon, Schwinka was drafted in 2021. Okay, they had Jason Pierre-Paul there in 2021, but then they decided to let Pierre-Paul walk, so then Joe Tryon, Schwinka could step into that role. Same thing kind of with Ndamukong Suh. They have Logan Hall kind of stepping into Ndamukong Suh's role there. I know they still paid Akeem Hicks, but it was a 1-year deal, so I think they're hoping that, then eventually Logan Hall, and then they can let Hicks walk, and they won't have to pay, a premium for a defensive lineman, because like you said, you're going to have a guy 3 or 4 years under contract relatively cheap at a pretty important position. So that's why they always say the best thing to have in sports, basically in football, is a really productive quarterback on a rookie contract, because you can do so many things. I think it's the same with defensive linemen. If you have a cheap, talented defensive line, you can build a lot of other things around that, and I think that's what the Bucs are starting to learn now. They've really, honestly, the last 2 drafts they hit it a little bit more, but before that they didn't really hit too many defensive linemen. They didn't pick too many besides Vita Vea. Other than that, they didn't really pick many edge rushers. They didn't really pick many interior guys, and now they're starting to figure that out, and I think both Logan Hall and Joe Tryon are continuing to develop. And I mean, if they take another step, let's say mid-season here, and then they're by the playoffs, they're really seasoned, it could be a game changer for the Bucs defense. It really could.
I know we've spent some time praising the young guys, and we talk about Jason Light as well and his acquisition of talent these past few seasons. I don't mean to be the one to jump on here and criticize him, and by no means is that what I'm doing, but this is what some people have said. We've talked about how good these last 2 draft classes have been as far as producing guys who can come in and contribute, find spots on this team. Well, considering this 2022 free agent class hasn't been awesome, I mean, let's face it, we kind of found out this week that Kyle Rudolph doesn't have a whole lot left in the tank. He's not the guy. Julio Jones, Todd Bowles said today that, quote, he has a high pain tolerance, so we know that he's really hurt, end quote. And we're coming into this season thinking he's healthier than he's ever been just for him to miss 4 straight games. So Julio Jones may not be the answer there for wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. People talk about Russell Gage, but to be honest, I just don't know if he's had I don't know if he deserves quite as much criticism as the guys who are missing a bunch of games.
To be fair to Gage, one thing, Gage is being paid a lot of money, and then 2, he's also not being used the way I think he should be. I think he could be used a little bit better. So I think both things are true. He's being paid a lot of money. He's disappointing for the money, but also I think the coaching staff could put him in a little bit of better spots to get him a little more productive. Because saw it against Green Bay.
Let me put it all together in my opinion. I thought Julio was basically Tom doing his homeboy a favor. Julio's been like a great person, great human, and great player for years. What is the one thing he does not have on his resume?
A ring.
Championship, right? So you bring Julio here, he's not going to play a full season. He missed 6-7 games last year in Tennessee. So I never expected him to be available more than maybe 8 games. And I thought that those 8 games would be end of the year, not beginning of the year. When we talk about the deficiencies on the offensive line, to me, this is where the lack of production for guys like Russell Gage comes into play. Because Tom is pretty much taking the approach, I'm going to throw the ball to Leonard Fournette as much as possible. And when I do get aggressive and go down the field, it's going to be to Mike Evans. And then everything else, people just kind of finding their spots. And that's Chris Godwin, that's Russell Gage. Cade Otton looks like he's becoming a part of what they're doing. Rashad White gets a couple. So, I would put an incomplete on Russell Gage just because, I don't think the offense has gotten to the point where they're capable of really taking advantage of some of the weapons because they're still unsure what they have up front.
Right. Now, with that being...
I mean, to be fair, I think it's an incomplete on all these guys right now.
Yeah.
There isn't. Like a lot of the guys. Like the best one's probably been Logan Ryan probably, and he's been good, but like now he's hurt. So
yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. You had mentioned the offense kind of not being where we know they can be. This isn't their peak. With any season, even a Super Bowl winning season, those teams have peaks and valleys. People talk a lot about the 2020 Bucs offense, but they also seem to forget that team was 7-5 at one point. So there are peaks and there are valleys. This team is going to figure it out. But what do you think the peak for this offense looks like this year? Because with the talent across the board, it's easy to say that on paper, this is a more talented roster than we have seen. But there's also the people saying the offensive line isn't the same. Brady looks distracted. And since he's not throwing 3 to 4 touchdowns a game, obviously it means this offense is not capable of doing great things. But against the Falcons, I know they only put up 21 points, but everybody got a good look. It was one of their most offensively productive games of the season so far. Season high in just about every category.
Yeah, I think the thing about it is that I think they can be good. They're not going to be as explosive.
I don't think they're going to be averaging 30 points a game.
Yeah, no, like that's not going to happen. But I think because they want to be more efficient. They want to turn the ball over less, which, to be fair, they have. They have turned the ball over less. They've turned the ball over much less. I mean, Tom Brady only has 1 interception on the season, and that was week 1. So they want to turn it over less, and with that, that's going to mean less explosive plays. However, that doesn't mean the explosive plays are going to be completely gone. I think you're going to see that. And just like Shaun King said, I don't think this team is at its stride yet because they're still trying to figure out who they are. I think if they were fully healthy, I think by now they probably would have, but they weren't. They weren't fully healthy. They're just now, Godwin seems to be 100% good. Gage, I don't know if he's 100% healthy, but he's playing. Donovan Smith now back and looks good. So I think now they're gonna, and maybe you see that around week 7, week 8, then maybe they start to really put it together. Because I think right now they're still trying to figure out who they are on offense, what they want to be on offense. Because I mean, you had the lead for 90% of the Falcons game, and you still threw the ball over 50 times. So, like, what do you want to be as an offense? And I think that's, again, the fourth quarter, the reason they had a drive with 42 seconds and another drive with 36 seconds is because they don't really have that identity yet because they don't know it. And I think that part of the reason they let the Falcons back into that game, we talked about in the post-game show, was the offense. It was the offense not being able to control the clock. Like, you gotta control the ball when you have a 2-possession lead like that, and you can't stop the clock and give Atlanta free timeouts because it's not advantageous to you or your defense. And I think the best of this offense is yet to come. I just don't know if it's going to be what fans have grown accustomed to over the past few years.
Well, let me say this. Father Time don't send you a 2-week notice. You don't get like a letter of termination in the mail, and you got 30 days, and you out of here. So I think a lot of this is Tom trying to figure out where his fastball is at 45.
I mean, to be fair, it looks fine to me, but
we saw him crank it at least twice, targeting Scotty Miller 45 yards downfield. So, I mean, the arm strength, if it has dropped off any, it isn't very much. So I don't know if the Bucs are too worried about him making those throws as of now.
And I don't know if Tony can't do it. I mean, you look at Justin Verlander. He can still hit 100, but he only can do it in spots. He can't do it for 5 innings like he used to. And, hopefully Tom's got 2-3 years left. But again, when you get 45, you fight every day. You learn something new. And mentally, how comfortable is he with what's in front of him? As a quarterback, the psychological part doesn't get talked about a lot, but that matters. Like, it impacts you. You can see it impacting Joe Burrow. Like, when did Cincinnati become a dink and dunk offense? Well, he got sacked 70 times last year. He on pace to break that this year. And all of a sudden, Burrow don't want to stand in the pocket and throw the ball down the field. It's all, let me get rid of the ball quick. Let me get the ball in my playmakers' hands. So we'll see. So I'm just saying that I think that's a part of the evolution of the offense as well. Is what is Tom comfortable with this group? Physically, how does he feel from week to week? If you notice on the camera, he seems to be something's going on with that right hand. I don't know exactly what it is, but you can see him trying to, stretch it out and either get rid of something or loosen something up. So, you just have to watch everything, this year, because I think it's all got to organically come into play to win it all, which is the ultimate goal. And so my expectations, my opinions are always based on that ultimate objective. I don't look at, this year's team through a prism of development or, building block for next year. I look at this year's team as this is the last year this group as we know it is going to be together.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this one question before we wrap things up here. It has to do with the offensive philosophy under new head coach Todd Bowles. And I know you've heard the comparisons a lot so far this season because early on in these games, the offense still trying to figure it out, but they have not been spectacular like many people are used to. The defense has carried the load, so people are going to make comparisons to Tony Dungy Bucs ball from the late 90s where the offense wasn't known for being high-powered, and you had a defense that had playmakers all over the place who could win you football games. As far as that being applied this year, there's a ton of factors that go into it. Play calling obviously going to be something. The Bucs not being able to convert with a quarterback sneak because they just have not tried it. The 4th and 1, a lot of people are going to be upset. Even the installation of more of an attempt at the running game with Leonard Fournette. I know you just paid your running back, but we have seen some more production from that position. Do you think this coaching staff is looking at this offense and they're trying to plan things out with the idea that, yeah, Tom Brady's 45 years old and we just do not want to put the abuse on him? Or do you look more at that incomplete offensive line that we had alerted to a little bit earlier in the show? Like, what do you think is the biggest factor for this Bucs coaching staff to kind of have this offense in the position that they do? Is it just a trial and error period?
I think it's really figuring out, what our limits are. When you lose the type of talent on the interior line that they did, I mean, you got to figure out what do you have.
Yeah.
When we had Ali Marpet, Ryan Jensen, and Kappa, you could pretty much run, hurry up, no huddle all game because those guys could handle it mentally and they could physically execute it. You could be in a lot of empty formations, because you had a huge matchup advantage, size and talent with Gronkowski. So now without those three guys and without Gronk, they're trying to figure out how to mesh. This is what Byron Leftwich is trying to do. How do the pieces fit so that I get guys in position to do what they're best at? And the only way you find that out with the way teams approach the preseason, which is no one plays, no one practices, is during the regular season, unfortunately. So I think what we're witnessing is the evolution of that process. This is why I would hope moving forward the teams decide to actually use the preseason games what they are for, which is to iron all these kinks out so that when we hit game one, we're operating at maximum output, but that's not how they do it now. So you figure it out as the season goes on. And I think that's where they're at.
Yeah, I think, as far as like the offensive philosophy and everything, like, here's the thing, like you say, oh, are they protecting Tom Brady because he's 45? Well, he just threw the ball over 50 times 2 straight weeks. So how much are you really protecting him? And if you have questions about your offensive line, like, I think the Bucs are more confident in their offensive line than a lot of other people are. I mean, and sure, like they should be. And I think the offensive line honestly has held up better than I thought it would early in the season. I thought there might have been some struggles, especially with some of the defensive lines they were going to be going up against. But the offense, it's like you said about there's some small things. It's the 4th and 1. It's the inability to convert in the red zone, getting instead of field goals, turn them into touchdowns. It's those small things, the third downs, which they were much better on third down yesterday than they have been in the previous 4 games. But it's just there's small things there that the offense can do better, and I think they will get it. Some of them ironed out. Like, these are professional guys. They're still really talented, but when you lose, like you said, Ali Marpet was a Pro Bowl left guard. Ryan Jensen's a Pro Bowl center. Obviously, and you were expecting to have Jensen for this year. Like, you were expecting to have that Pro Bowl center, and you didn't. So, and then Alex Kappa was a good right guard. Yeah, you replace him with Shaq Mason, who I also think is a good right guard. But it's tricky because you're trying to work in a lot of new pieces, and now you're trying to work in a new running back in Rashad White. You're trying to work in a new receiver in Russell Gage. You're trying to work in 2 new tight ends, really, in Cade Otton and Kyle Rudolph, and then even not even mentioning Keith. So
stop it, Evan. Stop it. Kyle Rudolph, that's a buddy favor again, too, man. Listen.
I know.
I will say this about Rashad White. What you're seeing from that kid is the floor of what he's capable of.
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I can tell that he's still mentally is still not processing fast. Like, everything is because you want to be, assignment perfect. You want to be technique sound, and when your mind is like, okay, what's my footwork on this run? Okay, how deep is this pass route? Okay, who do I block? The talent doesn't really get to just get to its optimum level. And once he really gets comfortable with what he's responsible for assignment-wise, I'm just telling you, that kid is super talented.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway for me when watching his game last week and this week is he's becoming more and more comfortable. And we knew it pre-draft and when they drafted him, but he's becoming more and more comfortable as a pass catcher. And he's making the extra move. I would give him a few early downs as well, because I think right now he might be a better pass blocker than Fournette, like just a pure pass blocker. I know obviously Fournette's got the size, which would help. But I think you could give Rashad White a few runs, just to see, on that 4th and 1, maybe as a change of pace, a different look. Maybe you throw Rashad White in there instead of Leonard Fournette.
And we saw the Bucs do that for a few drives. I mean, a couple series in a row in the 3rd and 4th quarter. It seemed like 3 or 4 drives in a row. For sure, he was in the game. There wasn't a whole lot of Leonard Fournette going on, but that also plays into wanting to keep your guys fresh towards the end of the year. The Bucs just started paying Leonard Fournette. They paid him for 3 years, right around $7.5 million a year. You don't want to run a guy like that into the ground in the first quarter of the season. So when he vocalizes, hey, I'm going to need some of these other talented running backs to take the load off, it's good to see Rashad White stepping up into that role. And with him getting... Yeah.
Hey, Rick, quick question. We talk about needing a replacement for Geticky. Is getting a short yardage back something the Bucs need to do? For everything that I think Fournette is good at, I do not think he's good in short yardage situations. And Rashad White is definitely more of a 3rd down back than he is a 4th and short back. Is it maybe something to going and getting a more powerful body, for those situations? Obviously, Brady went from the best QB sneak guy in the league to, at this age, not really, looking like that's what he wants to do at this point. That's a tricky thing physically now at quarterback when you go to sneaking. It's not all, roses and perfume under there. Like,
real quick, one note I wanted to make on the quarterback sneaks. I think that is a product of Geticky being inexperienced, Haynesey being inexperienced. I think both of those are a big
even
factor.
look at the 4th and 1 with Leonard Fournette. The reason that run failed is because there was no push at the line of scrimmage. They didn't win anything.
Well, also, but if Fournette falls forward, Geticky had a little push, and
Fournette, that's not what Leonard is good at. Like, and you can tell when he runs in those situations, he don't take like the no risk it, no biscuit approach. Like, he
can't make
everything better be perfect.
Enough. He can't, in those situations, he can't make the decision on what hole to hit quick enough, and it costs him right there. So, I mean, but honestly though, rather than adding a power back, we think that Rashad White's more of that 3rd down guy, but how about you give an opportunity, see if maybe he can do it.
I scouted him. I had him as my number 2 back in this draft, Evan, behind Breece Hall. Mm-hmm. He's a converted wide receiver.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, try something different. I think you could just try it. That's all.
Hey, Shaun, I don't know if you know this, but there's another running back on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers roster, and it is Evan's favorite player on the team. Why not give Keyshawn Vaughn a look? I know he's not I know he's not the bowling ball presence you want out of a short yardage back, but he didn't find some success at the end of the year last year, filling in with, the depleted roster they had.
I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, size doesn't make you a great short yardage back. Like, I think the kid in Kansas City, Pacheco, is a great short yardage back because he runs with such power. Damian Pierce in Houston, not a huge guy, but he runs with low center of gravity, very hard to tackle in one-on-one situations. So Keyshawn could fit that role. I just was bringing up, and see what people want to say in the comments and what their opinions are as they listen to it. Should we start identifying somebody for that specific, aspect of offensive football, because we're going to be in those situations. And regarding quarterback sneaks, I wouldn't do it. Only time I would QB sneak is if it was in a hurry up situation and they were off. We caught them off guard. I'm not getting up there with them 300-pounders in 4-point stances. Hell no. That's why we pay running backs.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, but before we head out, it's important to remember the Bucs won this game. And
absolutely.
With that, they're 3-2. They're 2-0 in the division now, which may be even more important. Being 2-0 in the division is always a positive thing. Have a chance to go 3-0 in a few weeks, but really quick, Shaun, just a little, 30 seconds a minute. Looking ahead to this matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, it could be a tough road game. I think after getting embarrassed like that on the road, for Pittsburgh. Teams don't, you don't like to be embarrassed. They're professionals. I think a lot of teams even if the talent level is not there, they'll come out, play with a little bit more fire next week. Kenny Pickett's home debut as the starter. So what are you expecting from that matchup in Pittsburgh?
Well, I mean, the NFL is the number one product because of its parity. Like, it's the only professional sports league where every team from year to year thinks that they can turn it around in one off season because of the salary cap. Like, think about the enthusiasm and excitement down in Jacksonville before Sunday's game.
Yeah.
Like, they were talking about winning the AFC South. Like, we got all the pieces we need. And the Texans come in, haven't won a game, and hey, you don't show up with your A game, and guess what? You get your butt kicked. Having said that, Pittsburgh's a dumpster fire right now. Like, and it's amazing how much one player can change a defense, and they just aren't very good without TJ Watt. When TJ Watt's there, I mean, he elevates everybody around him. He hides a lot of the warts that exist, but again, they match up with Tampa better than they have with some of their most recent opponents, because Brady is not an athletic, make guys miss quarterback. If you go back and look at and break down Josh Allen and Zach Wilson, they were able to avoid the rush, extend some plays, and create some explosive stuff off of that. The big deal with Kenny Pickett is, and the Jets game wasn't his fault, but it still is what it is he's turned the ball over a lot. He throws a lot of balls up for grabs. George Pickens has made some plays. Deontay Johnson has made some plays. So it'll be a big week for Jamal Dean, Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy Bunting, and those guys playing the ball in contested situations down the field, because he is going to take some chances. He is going to be aggressive. And if they can catch some of those balls like the last two defenses have done, give Tom and that offense some extra possessions, then we should be okay.
Yeah, and all those guys you just mentioned as well, Mike Edwards could be lumped into there. They're going to pop up on the injury report this week after leaving Sunday's game, so it'll be something to monitor, but should be a great game. And I know they don't have TJ Watt and they got a rookie quarterback, but Pittsburgh is usually a tough place to play, so it could be an interesting road test for this Buccaneers team looking to keep the ball rolling. But ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much for checking us out over on YouTube or listening on any of our audio sources. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show and, of course, Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram, Bucs_daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Shaun King, where can the people find you, follow you, and check out your awesome content?
I gotta send you all my stuff because you
I know,
express it so much more eloquently than I can.
Honestly, I've been on the same, like when I do this outro script, I've been saying the same thing at the end of the show for 3-4 years that like I don't even think about it. I could probably mess up a word and not even notice at this rate.
Evan, he got the neck position and everything. And next to the stage.
Yeah, he's.
No, you guys can find me on Twitter at Real Shaun King, on Instagram at Coach Shaun King, and then I have a television show from 3 to 6 Pacific, Monday through Friday on VSiN, VSIN. You can download that app, or you can watch it on YouTube television, Fubo, or Hulu.
Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram, and Twitter at Rhettacus, RHETT. AKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show, folks. It all fits together so perfectly, man.
All right, fellas. Y'all enjoy your week.
You too, boss. Appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish and Shaun King. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.